All right, here we go. This is Revenue Roadmap, where we talk about sales and marketing for local entrepreneurs. My name is Anthony Karls, president of Rocket Clicks, and I am with Mr. James Patterson again. Thanks for joining me again.
Yep.
We are going to be talking about another paid search, paid media topic today, and we're going to talk about testing versus optimization. So, James, before we get into that, hit me with something interesting about what you do outside of work.
Yeah, outside of work, I'm a pretty avid runner. Back in the COVID time period, I think a lot of people were looking for new ways to spend the time or whatever, and really found myself missing the gym. So I wanted to find a way to kind of stay fit and be active, and started running outdoors, and kind of turned into a kind of a passion of mine. So been kind of
Well, do you do marathons, half marathons? You just run for fun?
mostly for fun right now, but aspirations to do something more serious one day. I've got an Ironman in my 10-year picture. I think is something I want to get to, but definitely have a lot of milestones leading up to there. So probably do a marathon in the next year or two, and then go from there. So we're
Okay,
building.
time for honesty. When you and Lisa run, who
Yeah.
who wins the belt most often?
So I'll give Lisa credit on the short distance. She's very speedy in those kind of quicker time ones. I definitely have a little bit more of the endurance. So sometimes on the longer runs, I'll beat her out. But she definitely has my number when it comes to the shorter distances for sure.
I'm at least you can claim one of them. When I do anything with Chelsea, if it's over like 400 or 500 meters, not a chance.
Yeah.
She's a swimmer in college. She just kicks my butt all the time.
Yeah.
So embarrassment at the CrossFit gym is for me.
Yep. Nice.
All right. So let's talk about what are we talking about here? So what's the difference? What are we talking about when we say testing versus optimization?
Mhm.
Tell us generally what we mean by that.
Yeah. So the biggest distinction between testing and optimization, since both, kind of terminology, I think it's thrown out a lot in our industry, is really understanding like the impact and the degree in which you're evaluating two different things, right? So both in testing and optimization, you'll be effectively trying to understand if some type of change is performing better or worse than whatever the original, kind of condition of whatever you're looking at is. So when we kind of weigh the two different elements between testing and optimization, we think of
let's like draw a specific use case so that we can like create some clarity, this in difference here.
Yeah. So for an optimization, an example of that might be something that's, definitely a little bit lower in terms of, degree of change. So, if you think about a search campaign, right, maybe you're tweaking one headline in a search ad and testing that against obviously what you've had in market for a previous period of time. Or maybe something on a landing page, you're changing just the color of a button, right? So it's these kind of more minor type, variances in what you're kind of evaluating from the original version, but still obviously meaningful things to look at, and can help you over time kind of build up momentum with these kind of, a little bit more minimal impact, but still beneficial learnings to then ultimately get you to a bigger, improvement long-term by doing this on a consistent basis.
Yeah. So in our last podcast, we talked about buying data, and like, is this an example of what we mean by that?
Yeah.
Optimization. How does that play in? Talk a little bit more about that.
Yep, exactly. So like we talked about in our last podcast, buying data. So this really falls right into that, right? So we're putting part of our dollars, our marketing spend, into trying to understand, can we get, some, increase in whatever performance metric we're looking at. So that's why it's, also important between testing and optimization to really understand what metrics you want to look at. Obviously, we've talked a lot on the podcast about, evaluating the waterfall and things like this. Generally speaking, especially on the optimization side of things, since they are a little bit smaller type tests, you are going to be a little bit more focused in maybe some of the platform metrics or things like Microsoft Clarity and stuff like that if it's a landing page test. But that's ultimately what's going to build you up to get to an end. And then hopefully over time, as you're reviewing things with more impactful business metrics like your waterfall, you're able to draw a connection between obviously this improvement you've made over time to seeing numbers improve in your business data as well.
Got it. So the concept here is testing These are large changes to a campaign, or potentially maybe an ad or a landing page or something.
Mhm.
And the optimization is small tweaks. So maybe we're going to tweak the headline a little bit, or we're going to make a small adjustment on the landing page, like changing the color of a button or something like that.
Yep.
So when you think about how to do this in the paid media landscape, like what percentage of the time are you running tests versus what percentage of the time are you running optimizations? And like, how much should we think about allocation in terms of percent of traffic or percent of budget? Like what's a good way to think about this so that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot and doing unnecessary damage to ourselves?
Yeah, so basically the maturity of your marketing program is gonna really influence if you're in this optimization side of things or if you're in this testing side of things more frequently. So a more mature marketing program or business that's obviously, been in market for a while, you're hitting your revenue goals pretty consistently. We have a proven process where we can look back at your financials that the marketing strategies are working to help achieve the business goals. You're probably going to fall in more of the optimization bucket. So it's basically not jolting the boat that is moving on the ocean in a very smooth fashion towards the goals we want to achieve. Whereas a business that's a little bit newer and maybe hasn't invested as many resources and time into kind of looking at the whole marketing strategy, those are definitely going to be more in the testing bucket and kind of truly trying to understand, are these more significant changes? Like maybe it's like we've never used a landing page before. We've been just driving traffic to the regular old website. Does driving traffic to this landing page now for the first time ever, drive significant improvement to the results that we're tracking against it? So that's kind of the way to think about it. So like both businesses, both mature and kind of more in that startup and growing phase, are both going to do a combination of optimization and testing at different times. But the degree of maturity in which you have for your business, probably the less of these massive tests that you're going to be doing on a recurring basis, and it's going to be more of that kind of slight tweak. Again, it's like kind of like
Is the
build
is
up.
when you say maturity, is that more about like achieving industry benchmarks for like top performance, or are you talking about, I've been in business for 10 years, so I'm a mature business because we've been running for a while? Like, talk a little bit about that, because it sounds like it's the former, and it may be situational depending on, we've only ran on Google, but we haven't ran on Facebook. So are we in optimization on Facebook and optimization on Google, or are we one versus the other? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, good distinction for sure. So obviously, just because you've been a business for 10 years doesn't necessarily mean that you're at a good point to where you'll be basically mostly in this optimization phase. So it's really going to come down to, again, like, we talked back to our earlier podcasts about building the waterfall and really understanding how our marketing program is going to help, influence our business metrics and KPIs. It's really basically looking at it from the perspective is, how long have we had these platforms active? We've had them active for, a number of years. Generally is going to be kind of more so in the optimization category versus maybe, to kind of your example, Tony, if like, we just started our Facebook ads account last week. So that's definitely kind of more so when I'm talking about on the maturity front. Just because you've been in business for a while or doing different degrees of marketing doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, we've got it all figured out. So it's going to depend a little bit that way for sure. I would say generally speaking, when you get to this phase to where you're more so doing the optimization side of things, is basically your vendor, or if you're an in-house team, whoever, is kind of looking over and overseeing your marketing strategy. If they're getting to the point where it's like, we're having conversation about monitoring and we're evaluating the performance on a particular channel, and we're pushing or giving good feedback that we're hitting our benchmarks we've set and all these types of things, that's generally a good indicator that you're probably in this more mature time period to where you're looking for kind of little tweaks to kind of continue to move the needle just a little bit further up.
So if a business introduces, that's been in a mature place, and a channel introduces a new offer, how would we think about that?
Yeah. So if a business introduces a new offer, then we would definitely consider that to be in the testing bucket. So that's a pretty large shift in potential value to your customer, and obviously a key component to your marketing strategy and driving that new business. So that's something that we would definitely put into the testing bucket, and you'd want to basically look at that from the difference from optimization to testing is really the length of time in which you're looking at it, and the amount of resources and efforts you're going into that test to make sure that you've kind of set down what your goals for that how you're going to measure it, and then ultimately follow the loop and determine from there. Kind of the best form of this, right, is if, you go through a larger test, you set your goals over the course of, varying time, usually at least 4 weeks we're looking at, if not longer, a lot of times. You were to determine the test was successful, a lot of times those will actually then inspire other optimization, kind of smaller tests, right? So it's like, we know this offer really works, but have we tried the offer in our email program? Have we tried the offer in social? So maybe it's just tweaking some of the strategy there to test out new messaging around that offer in different platforms.
Yeah. I know one of the things that I've used in the past is understand kind of what are the industry benchmarks for a related offer in a similar industry and how far off are my metrics? Because if I'm achieving a 20% call rate on a landing page, probably in an optimization place for like law firms specifically. If I'm at like 5%, I probably should do more tests in terms of how that page is laid out and how it's designed and what my messaging is and all that, because I know like based on achieving industry excellence standards, like there's quite a big delta and opportunity that's missed there. So that's another way to think about it. Again, like we talked about, new channel, new offer that we're going to go to market with. What else? What are some other examples of when we would want to tweak this?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say like, just to give some kind of examples of the difference between the two is like, one of the law firms we work with, they've really built up their marketing program over the course of time. Their paid search strategy is in a really great spot, quite frankly. Most of the time we're having conversations about like, should we leave it on or not? Because lead flow is really great. And usually it's because something maybe in the sales process that they're working out and stuff like that. So it's like from a channel perspective, we're driving really great lead flow, very happy with the program. So this is really a channel we're looking at for optimization. So like one of the things the teams are doing right now is they're looking for slight tweaks in the ad creative as for opportunities to maybe see if we can just drive a little bit more click-through rate, ultimately bring down CPCs. So again, that's what I'm talking about, where we kind of, we want to always focus obviously on the waterfall reporting to evaluate marketing holistically. But then when we're talking about kind of these smaller test optimizations, you're going to generally pick out some of these more, upper funnel type metrics like a click-through rate or things like that, however you want to kind of go through it. Whereas a different law firm that we're working with, basically net new to a lot of these platforms, haven't looked at anything. So we're actually working with them with that kind of the example I mentioned previously was they've been just driving traffic right to the site all along. And, honestly, from their perspective, they're like, oh, we feel like our paid search program's going okay. I'm looking to, us to go and find ways to improve it and whatnot. And this is something we're really looking forward to. So we've gone through a whole conversation about, what we want the landing page to look like, what are the different elements on there that are going to kind of play into our strategy to ultimately influence conversion rate and get folks to ultimately take their concerns or questions and reach out to, their intake team to ultimately get an eval and consultation and move through the funnel. So this is much larger program from them, from going from just sending to the regular website to ultimately building out a whole new place for their customers to potentially see first as their first interaction with this brand. So it takes a lot more work from thinking through hero images to, again, kind of structure of the page, even button colors. Obviously, right now are matching that more to the brand look and stuff like that. But ultimately, those are kind of two examples where like we have this law firm that's a little bit net new to their marketing program and one that's like kind of high flying. Though that's kind of the best example of like the difference between the two types of tests that may exist.
Awesome. So big picture, when we're in paid media, there's always opportunities to learn. One of the ways we can buy data is through intentionally testing or intentionally optimizing, making sure we're balanced there. I guess one more question before we wrap up. What's the risk of doing tests? So because they don't always win.
Yeah. So it goes back to buying data, right? So, the way that we always like to frame tests, right? It always sucks when you think of this great idea, right? I think this ad creative is going to absolutely smash. We have some data to maybe support why we want to test this, yada, yada. Well, sometimes it doesn't work, right? I think the most important thing to really fall back on, again, is that buying data concept. By learning from this, although it was, didn't go the way that we wanted, we can now be more confident in our current strategy and now look at kind of what's next. We can if we're doing our jobs correctly, we're taking note of this test and why we feel like it failed and doing a proper wrap up on it and stuff like that. And that can really help you go from, which isn't always the most fun thing in the world, which is to say, sorry, client, this didn't work out the way that we initially expected, and take into a more positive conversation moving forward. Some of the cons with testing, right, is like I said, it's just really, really crucial that you go into a test, especially, and identify what's the timeline going to be like and the goal. I think that's a lot of times where these things go wrong, is that sometimes you'll be having interactions with the clients or your vendors and stuff like that, and they'll be saying, oh, 1 weekend we're smashing it or whatever, and looking at all these different things, and then by the end maybe it's not looking that way anymore. And it's like, well, it's good to keep a pulse on things, but it's also important that, like, going into it, we agreed that at the end, that's how we're going to value it. So even though the start was strong, we have to stay true to the fact that we said when we compiled all of this data over the course of the next 4 weeks, that's really, we're going to make our final decision. So that's really the cons, is I think that there is a lot of discipline that needs to be kind of ingrained in your team when you're going through this, for it to actually do what you want to do. Because I think all humans, right, if we're being honest, we always want our cool ideas to work out, and that's just not always the case. So I think that's the biggest thing, and not testing too much too. I think that the flip side of this, right, if you work with, I think everybody's worked with a person like this, where it's like, I want to test 9 different things at once, or, have this test going and then an element of that test going in a different area. And then that can, effectively ruin really the results, because now you've kind of blended it with different things. So again, discipline's, I think, probably one of the most important concepts, I would say, from testing, that I think doesn't always, come across when you're kind of going through the wrap up phase, is that you really need to have that to make sure that your testing program is successful.
Awesome. Cool. So to wrap up, when we're thinking about buying data in the marketplace, obviously we can buy data and understand what's working and what's not. One, to drilling down deeper into that, some methodologies we use is we run tests and we run optimizations. Tests are big changes. When we do those, we typically isolating those, so we're not throwing everything at a test or running a split test. Splitting the traffic so that we're knowing we're not putting the business at risk. And then there's optimizations, which are smaller changes. Again, we're going to run a split test on those. And then we're going to look at our results over time. We want to be disciplined. We want to be accurate. We want to rely on the data, not on how we feel about it. Because there's been plenty of times in my career, I'm sure in yours as well, where we don't like the results of the test, yes, even if the test won, but we hate the design or we hate whatever it looks like. And it's like, why do users like this? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Data wins. Yeah, my feelings. So anything else to add before we wrap up here?
No, I think it was a great discussion. Yeah, I think closing comment really is just that when you're going into testing, make sure you're going through the process of really identifying how you want to test it and for how long. Keep it clean. Don't, again, be disciplined. Fight the urge to test too many things or maybe have something overlap. Really be intentional with how you're setting it up, and ultimately expect that a lot of times your test may not be correct. But if you're doing the right things and wrapping up correctly, it should ultimately help you lead to the next test on the line, where, fingers crossed, maybe that's the time where you get kind of your golden idea comes across and ends up being a big winner for you.
Well, thanks, James. Appreciate it, sir.
Yep. Thanks.